Hello and welcome to Analysis. The announcement that a deal with the Western powers over Iran's nuclear program is at hand has sent shockwaves through the Middle East. Jubilant crowds greeted the news in Iran, but Israel's government reacted with undisguised hostility. The Gulf monarchies were pretty unenthusiastic about the deal as well. So were Republicans in the United States. Following fast on the heels of the news from Iran, it became clear that the Syrian government and opposition will both attend the renewed peace conference in Geneva early next year. So, are we finally leaving the era of the war on terror behind? Have we reached the limit of the US's ability to mount direct military intervention? Or will the deal collapse, as the hawks both in the US and Israel predict? With me to examine the new developments are Iranian political activist Yasmine and Nebal Istanbouly from the Syrian National Coalition. On Skype, we're joined by Professor Abbas Edalat from the Campaign Against Sanctions and Military Intervention in Iran. But first, let's catch up with this report.
Yesterday, history was made in Switzerland. Iran and 6 world powers reached an agreement to limit the country's atomic plans. In exchange, there will be no nuclear-related sanctions, and Tehran will receive sanctions relief worth about £4.3 billion.
The outcome of these negotiations is that the 5+1, or in other words, the world powers have recognized Iran's nuclear rights. The Islamic Republic of Iran innately enjoys this right, and this right has been granted to all the signatories by the NPT.
Welcoming reactions to the historical agreement came from all over the world.
For the first time in nearly a decade, we have halted the progress of the Iranian nuclear program, and key parts of the program will be rolled back. Iran has committed to halting certain levels of enrichment and neutralizing part of its stockpiles. Iran cannot use its next-generation centrifuges, which are used for enriching uranium. Iran cannot install or start up new centrifuges, and its production of centrifuges will be limited. Iran will halt work at its plutonium reactor, and new inspections will provide extensive access to Iran's nuclear facilities and allow the international community to verify whether Iran is keeping its commitments. On our side, the United States and our friends and allies have agreed to provide Iran with modest relief while continuing to apply our toughest sanctions. We will refrain from imposing new sanctions, and we will allow the Iranian government access to a portion of the revenue that they have been denied through sanctions.
It is a good deal for the Middle East and for the world. It's a very important opportunity for the future, and I think it vindicates the policy of pressure through sanctions and diplomacy through negotiations in which the United States and the United Kingdom have been strong partners for so long.
With Iran, this could not have happened if the P5+1 had not been unified, if our friends had not come together to create sanctions, enforce the sanctions, and to press this agreement. Now the really hard part begins, and that is the effort to get the comprehensive agreement, which will require enormous steps in terms of verification, transparency, and accountability.
The agreement is beneficial for peace and stability in the Middle East, and is beneficial for all parties to develop normal relations with Iran, of course beneficial for the Iranian people to have a better life. This agreement includes all parties concerned. The key for next step is to carry it out.
We've worked very hard. I've spent a lot of time with Minister Zarif. Of course, when you get to the detail of trying to finalise an agreement, in a sense that is the hardest part. But we've done it in the spirit of cooperation, good atmosphere, and although it's been intensive and very, very detailed, it's also been done with a real sense of mutual respect, and I'm delighted that we've got there.
Well, India has throughout had a very special relationship with Iran, and we have also consistently maintained that a negotiated resolution of this issue, particularly about the nuclear program of Iran, should be there. And we are happy that there has been a breakthrough.
Iran is a close brotherly country, close neighbor, good friend, and of course anything that contributes to peace and stability and normalcy in the region is welcome. And this, I'm sure, will lead to opening of better cooperation in all sectors, economy, trade, energy, between Iran and its neighboring countries, including Pakistan and the rest of the region.
But for the Israelis, this agreement is bad news and will make the world a more dangerous place.
For years, the international community has demanded that Iran cease all uranium enrichment. Now, for the first time, the international community has formally consented that Iran continue its enrichment of uranium. And this is in direct contravention of UN Security Council resolutions.
So what does this agreement mean for Western relations with Iran? Is Iran opening to the West? And what implications will this agreement have on Iran's relations with neighboring countries?
Well, let me bring in Professor Abbas Edalat first. Abbas, this is quite a turnaround from the days when George Bush described Iran as part of the axis of evil. Is it as a fundamental a turning point as that? Will it stick?
I think it's a historic turning point, yes. And I think the struggle of Iranian people for over 3 decades to be recognized as a sovereign state and to have their nuclear rights recognized has borne fruition. There's no doubt about this. The text of the agreement and also the assertions made by Lavrov and the French Prime Minister Fabius confirm that the P5+ have accepted Iran's rights for enrichment, including home-based enrichment of uranium. And this is what Iran has always been after. What Alexander Haig said in your report does not make sense at all. He claims that it was the pressure of sanctions which brought Iran to the negotiating table. In fact, Iran's position has not changed for 3 decades. Iran always maintained that in return for the recognition of its rights for nuclear enrichment on its soil, it would go well beyond its obligations under NPT to be transparent. In fact, 10 years ago, in the EU3 negotiations with Iran, Iran only had 164 centrifuges and made this offer to EU3. Of course, the backseat driver was the United States behind all the negotiations. The offer was that Iran would keep its 164 centrifuges for research and development and ratify and implement the additional protocol, which provides intrusive inspections anywhere, anytime. And under pressure of the United States, the EU, and in fact the United States, rejected this offer. If we look at the deal on Sunday, Iran has got 1,000 times more centrifuges now. And it can have its centrifuges and its nuclear installments intact. It's not going to make any more advances, but Iran does not need to make any more advances on its nuclear enrichment program because it has already got enough 20% enriched uranium to work with the Tehran research reactor for many years to come. And it does not need to further expand its low-level enriched uranium for production of energy. So Iran has not given anything really, while the West has finally recognized by retreating from the position it had in 2003 and 2005, Iran's rights for home-based enrichment. So it's a clear victory for Iran.
Okay, Yasmine, is that the way you see it? I mean, I guess Abbas's point is really that the West blinked first.
I don't think that's true. I think there is a change in policy on both sides, but Iran has suffered, the Iranian people have suffered because of sanctions. I agree that sanctions didn't stop the nuclear program. I agree that sanctions didn't affect the wealth of both the foundations, but also the private wealth of senior clerics in Iran. But the Iranian people have suffered terribly for what is a U-turn by Iranian standards as well. The issue of enrichment is in doubt. Kerry is putting serious doubts in the subject of enrichment. Iran is presuming that the reduction of 20% to 5% means that forever it will have the right to enrichment. Kerry, in his press interview immediately after the talks, was saying that's not the case. It doesn't matter the details of how that develops. What matters is that the price that the Iranian people have paid for this adventurous policy has been a very heavy price in terms of the destruction of the economy, the destruction of the car manufacturing industry, huge job losses, mass unemployment, spiraling prices in terms of basic food material, and it is the pressure from below that has changed this policy inside Iran.
And do you think that well, there isn't actually a relaxation of sanctions as such, or it reads as if there's a marginal relaxation and some recompense at the moment? Is that significant to what it will feel like on the ground in Tehran and other Iranian cities?
There will be a breathing space, there is no doubt. The sum involved is very little, $7 billion out of many more, billions more. What it does matter is the perception. The Iranian currency gained yesterday in terms of its value. I think the reconstruction or rebuilding of the car manufacturing industry will alleviate, to a certain extent, massive unemployment in Iran. And the general mood is now positive, and of course that has some effect on the economy. But the Iranian economy is in a terrible state for an oil-producing country, and some of it has gone to black market expenses to make 35,000 centrifuges. Zarif was very clear. The sanctions haven't affected the nuclear development program.
Abbas, in all the broadcasts here, Kerry and William Hague and so forth were saying this is proof that sanctions worked. But it was probably their inability to carry through the military action against Syria which opened the door to both a diplomatic route in Syria and Iran, wasn't it?
I mean, the majority of Iranian people, the overwhelming majority of Iranian people, have been behind the civilian nuclear technology of the Iranian government. And it's their steadfast against the pressure of the West, and it's the historic defeat of the British government in the House of Commons in August, which could not get a vote of support for a military strike against Syria, which has brought this deal into fruition. There's no doubt that there is no public appetite in the West for another intervention in the region. And this was proven in the August vote in the House of Commons, which had its repercussions in the United States and also in France. So then I think they decided that they have to really go for a negotiated settlement with Iran, because there's no other way to bring about some notion of stability in Syria. So I think it's both the struggle of the Iranian people, and I would like to just make a comment about what Yasmine said. 60 years ago, we had the same sort of scenario. There were crippling sanctions on Iran's economy because the West did not allow Iran to control its own oil. It's the same scenario. Then this led to the 1953 coup and the bringing about of a puppet regime for a quarter of a century. This time, Iranian people have won. The Vietnamese people paid a much higher price for their independence. Millions of Vietnamese people were killed, murdered, bombed to death completely by the Americans. Compared to the price that the Vietnamese people and many other independent people have paid for their independence, I think it's true that sanctions have killed people in Iran, killed cancer patients and so on. But I think the Iranian people have accepted to give that sacrifice in order to earn their nuclear rights. And this will change the balance of forces in this unipolar world up till now, so that we're going to have a multipolar world. And the United States and its allies are no longer in a position to dictate their instructions against developing countries and sovereign nations.
Okay, let me put that. Nebal, do you think this is where we were, the diplomatic road began? The military road was really closed off by the decision, first of all, the British Parliament and then in America. Do you think this is what's taken us down this road?
To be honest, I don't think that even the USA or any Western country were serious about the military intervention or striking the Syrian regime. And this is so clear if you watch and see how the authorities address the Syrian issue in the media or in other parts.
Why do you think it was that David Cameron put a resolution to the House of Commons asking for permission to attack the Assad regime then? Do you think that was a joke?
I won't say it's a joke, but it's a kind of propaganda, let's say.
Do you think he knew he was going to lose? Do you think if he had won that vote and it was quite close, there wouldn't have been Tomahawk cruise missiles?
I don't think that they were like even the USA or any or all Western countries. They were not serious in attacking Syrian regime. They were not serious in interventing in Syria. And still, I think that they are not serious in aiding or helping Syrian people to get their freedom and dignity.
So, Yasmine, do you think that's the case, that there was that the Cameron government wasn't really trying to get a resolution in the House of Commons?
I think there was an attempt for a limited attack. It was always going to be a very limited attack. I think the Syrian scenario showed a weakness in the United States in that it couldn't get support from the G20s and it couldn't get the British support. France seemed to be gung-ho about it and so on. So it showed a change in terms of it remains the most important, powerful capitalist country, imperialist country, but there was a slight change in that. And I think that had its effect in regard to Iran. But let me stress that, of course, the Iranian people and anybody in their right mind would oppose the United States telling Iran whether it should have nuclear energy or not. Yeah? That's true of, I think, any sane person would say that. The question remains that for the Iranian people, this has now become a matter of their rights, their existence. But one has to also say that this government relies on crisis in order to survive. It actually likes crisis to survive. And it has done so in the last 30 years. The sanctions were part of the economic problems of Iran. Part of it was because of corruption of a government that claims to be the government of the poor, of the pure, and so on. And therefore, there will be opposition now to there will be demands put forward by ordinary Iranians, because if this process continues and this 6 months becomes a real deal with 5+1 powers, the Iranian people will have demands in terms of their own governments, what they don't like about their own government. And I think that's different from saying it's
Let me just put that point to Abbas, because I mean one of the points that that campaigners have always made is that the threat of Western intervention closes down the proper politics of the Iranian people. Do you think that this now will open up a window where a kind of a stronger civil society can emerge?
Definitely. I mean, if you go back 8 years under President Khatami, I mean, he pursued a more reformist policy, and NGOs flourished for quite a number of years. I myself was the founder of an educational NGO. We established 250 computer internet sites in 17 provinces in Iran. And we managed to do that because of the circumstances, because there was dialogue among civilizations, what Khatami promoted. But then came Mr. Bush. And labeled Iran as part of axis of evil. And then the hardliners won all the battles in the elections because they accused the reformists of not bringing anything to Iran. That was the prize that they got from the United States. So, of course, if the state of siege against Iran is ended, and there is a state of siege, there are military bases of the United States all over Iran, around Iran. There have been threats of military strikes against Iran, crippling sanctions against Iran, covert military operations. If these things end, and I hope that they will end, then there will be struggle of Iranian people for their own independent rights.
OK, well, I'm going to have to stop you there because we've come to the end of the first half of the programme. But do rejoin us for the second part of analysis, where we'll be looking at whether or not this new deal will enable Iran to play a stronger role in the region. Do rejoin us after the break.